Don't be fooled by images of this young man with a visibly beaten face. The reality is, he has caused a real tragedy. James Lloyd Allen was born in Providence, Rhode Island, USA, on August 29, 1954. He was one of 3 children born to Lloyd James Allen and Jacqueline Allen, with siblings named Danny and John. The Allens were a typical middle-class family, closely knit and active members of St. Thomas Church. The only out-of-the-ordinary aspect was Lloyd's job. He was a police captain in Providence. As a child, Allen admired his father and the idea of doing things right, though he still found time for some mischief during his school years. Allen is remembered by his family and friends for secretly listening to his favorite baseball team, the Boston Red Sox, on a radio earpiece during class, hoping the nuns wouldn't notice. Growing up with strong values of service, he eventually followed in his father's professional footsteps. His faith also remained a crucial part of his life. By the late 1970s, during weekly prayer meetings at St. Thomas Church, Allen's attention was drawn to a woman named Marge, who was from Bristol and 4 years his senior. Despite the daily demands of his police work, Allen was too shy to approach her. However, fate intervened when Marge was robbed and contacted the police. It turned out her home was in the area Allen patrolled. When responding to the call and finally meeting her, he found himself in a comfortable role. After taking her statement, he made several follow-up visits which led to dating. They married in 1988 at St. Thomas Church. She was 38 and he was 34. Allen and Marge had different personalities, but they shared the same core values and a deep love for each other. This love was the foundation of their wonderful family. They had 2 daughters, Jennifer and Caitlin. Allen wasn't the handiest person around the house, but he was a dedicated dad who adored his daughters more than anything. To support his family, he also worked a second job as a security guard at a supermarket on the east side of the city, which allowed Marge to stay home and take care of their daughters. Their marriage was mostly peaceful. They enjoyed staying in to watch TV or play with their daughters rather than going out. The only real disagreement at home was about baseball, since Marge was a big Yankees fan and she passed that passion on to her daughters. So, whenever they watched games together, there was a bit of a friendly rivalry. As the girls grew up, Marge started working at St. Thomas School. James, on the other hand, was all in on his job in public service, truly embodying what it meant to be an excellent police officer. His co-workers and friends saw him as a man of integrity, with a lot of compassion for crime victims and a knack for solving crimes. His amazing memory and observational skills, along with his resilience and courage, were what made him stand out. He always went the extra mile and was ready to answer calls even in the middle of the night. By 2005, he had become one of the most seasoned detectives in the department, honored with numerous medals, including the Departmental Medal of Honor and the Purple Heart. Known for his signature trench coat, rain or shine, James brought laughter and comfort to Marge and their friends. Meanwhile, Esteban Carpio lived nearby and seemed to be on the wrong side of the law. Born in Boston, Massachusetts on July 30, 1978, to an unknown father, Esteban was raised by his mother, a third-grade teacher. There isn't much known about his early years. As an adult, he worked as a barber and had a history of legal troubles related to substance possession. In the early 2000s, he started a relationship with Samaine Finn. They later had a daughter together. Esteban's behavior started to change for the worse in late 2004. He began acting oddly, claiming to hear voices and believing that a friend had cursed him or used voodoo on him. Whether true or not, his girlfriend took him to a Buddhist temple for help, where a monk tried to protect him by tying a rope around his waist. But it didn't help, and his condition didn't improve, so his mother called for a psychiatric evaluation. The doctors linked his issues to stress and substance abuse, but it's unclear if any steps were taken to address his substance use. The following year, with no improvement in his condition, his mother, Esteban Carpio, took him back to the hospital. That spring, Esteban crossed paths with Madeline Gata, an 84-year-old active woman who loved her craft of sewing. She had worked as an interior decorator and had created custom designs for various clients. She was also a proud grandmother to 6 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. On April 16, 2005, after finishing work early in the afternoon, Detective James grabbed a quick bite at a favorite spot before heading home. Meanwhile, Esteban, who was driving nearby, spotted Madeline. Seeing her as an easy target, he quickly got out of his car with a knife. He tried to steal her purse but ended up hurting her with the knife. Her screams alerted people nearby, and one quick-thinking neighbor noted Esteban's car license plate as he ran away. Madeline was taken to a health center where she managed to report what happened. Around 7 in the evening, James's phone rang at home, and he promptly answered. The call was about the attack on the elderly woman and the suspect's clear description, prompting the detective to spring into action. The police team, including James, arrived at Esteban's residence the next day. According to statements from Esteban's family, they warned the officers that Esteban was experiencing a mental crisis, having trouble sleeping, and was not in his right mind. Minutes later, he was taken to the Providence police station for questioning. Once there, he was led to a conference room on the 3rd floor and, as he was not under arrest, his handcuffs were removed. Detective James, assisted by another detective, began the interrogation. James was armed, as per regulation. Initially, Esteban provided a false name, denied any previous arrests, and claimed innocence. When Detective James warned him that he knew his real identity and was aware of his criminal record, Esteban became agitated and asked the other detective for some water. After the other detective left the room, Esteban managed to seize James's gun under unclear circumstances and lock the door from the inside. Timothy, the other detective, later recounted hearing Detective James screaming for help, saying Esteban was going to kill him. Shots were heard, and when they finally broke down the door, they found James dying from 2 fatal wounds, one to the chest and another to the forehead. Esteban had attacked the detective with his own gun and escaped by shooting out a window in an adjoining room, falling onto the grass below. A chaotic scene ensued outside the police headquarters as local, state, and federal officers launched a relentless citywide manhunt for the suspect. Meanwhile, James was rushed to Providence Hospital, but despite all medical efforts, he was declared deceased. Esteban was apprehended after an hour-long search, following a violent confrontation with a taxi driver. His capture was not easy. He was combative and violent. The police officers struck him 3 times in the face. From there, the officers took him to Rhode Island Hospital, where he was administered sedatives and later interviewed. The exchange was captured on a recording that clearly showcased Esteban's distressed voice. At the same time, the doorbell rang at the Allen home. While their daughters slept, Marge went downstairs to find 3 officers at the door. She invited them in, and they delivered the tragic news inside. Marge, stunned, asked where it had happened. Learning it was at the police station, She couldn't believe it. Of all places, that should have been the safest for a police officer. From that moment, her mind struggled to function normally, and the pain hit her hard. The officers called friends of the Allens to stay with the girls and then escorted Marge to the hospital in a patrol car, as only a direct relative could claim the body. She later recounted how the hospital corridors were filled with police officers, all nodding respectfully as she passed. They led her to the trauma room. Her husband lay on the table. The wounds were lethal, yet not visible. On Monday, April 18, 2005, at 10 a.m., a second interview took place at police headquarters. A hysterical Esteban was interrogated again. During the interview, Esteban often rambled, insisting he was insane and unloved. This exchange was also recorded. Meanwhile, the police chief and James's colleagues gathered at the Providence District Court, awaiting Esteban's arraignment. Beyond showing solidarity and affection for their fallen comrade, they wanted to see the man capable of such actions. The tension in the room was palpable as all eyes turned to Esteban, who walked with difficulty, his hands and feet shackled. Several officers escorted him. He had bruises and cuts on his face and wore a white mask covering from his chin to his eyes, making him resemble Hannibal Lecter from The Silence of the Lambs. The moans and screams of his mother and girlfriend soon followed. His mother immediately accused the police of beating her son. Officials struggled to remove both women from the courtroom as they continued to cry out about cover-ups and police brutality. Esteban's face was bleeding and sweating. His eyes were swollen, and his cheeks, forehead, and skull area were severely bruised. His face was marred with multiple bruises and scars. However, such a mask, known as a spit shield, is used by law enforcement when a suspect is injured or combative. Due to Esteban's previous state, the officers decided to take maximum precautions and placed a spit shield on him. They explained that he had injured a leg, an arm, and his head when he jumped out of the window. When accused of murder, he responded by nodding, not denying the crime committed. He only spoke to tell his mother he loved her as he was escorted out of the courtroom. Subsequently, Esteban was detained without bail. Given that the victim was an on-duty police officer, the charge carried a maximum sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As is common in such cases that shock the public, a press conference led by the police chief was necessary. However, many questions remained unanswered as he did not explain how Esteban managed to seize the officer's gun or the details leading up to the sequence of gunshots. He also did not discuss weapon-carrying protocols within police facilities or associated interrogation procedures, nor did he mention if there were any witnesses. Instead, he expressed heartfelt words for Detective James. James was posthumously promoted to the rank of Detective Sergeant. On April 21, 2005, a sea of police officers and officials accompanied the procession preceding his funeral service. Although it could have been held at the downtown cathedral, Marge chose differently, faithful to the story that had always connected them to St. Thomas Church. The funeral service was held there. After the religious ceremony, James was taken on a 4-mile final journey to St. Anne's Cemetery by a horse-drawn carriage. Marge was moved to see thousands of people, including police officers from across the country, lining the route. Beyond the crime and ensuing mourning, the case of the detective brought to the forefront a long-standing concern: the security in government buildings. Unfortunately, it wasn't the first time such an incident had occurred. For some time, visitors to the Providence Police Building had to pass through a metal detector. What no one had anticipated was that an individual would disarm an officer of his service weapon. In this context, Michael Brady, a police procedures expert and professor at the University in Newport, Rhode Island, mentioned that it was not unusual for a detective to interrogate a suspect while armed. Thus, James was not doing anything different from what police officers do daily across the country. However, the controversy over alleged police abuse against Esteban dominated headlines and online news portals. Later, an investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI) concluded that there was no excessive force by the Providence police, who were compelled to subdue the man due to his violent behavior. It was a special agent from the FBI who presented the report to the press, adding that if the subject resisted the police officers, they were fully justified in using whatever force necessary to subdue him. Despite these claims, Esteban's family continued to insist on the accusations against law enforcement and highlighted Esteban's mental disorder.
It's gross police brutality. He was mentally ill and he needed help and we couldn't get it. We tried and tried. And he didn't deserve this.
And in fact, his defense team centered their strategy around his mental disturbance. During the trial preparations, Esteban was evaluated by several mental health experts. The defense enlisted a psychiatrist and forensic neuropsychologist. After reviewing Esteban's medical records from hospital visits prior to the incident and listening to tapes of post-arrest interviews, these specialists concluded that the accused suffered from schizophrenic psychosis and an acute onset of paranoid psychosis. The state's evaluation was conducted by neuropsychologist and professor David Faust and forensic psychiatrist and psychiatry professor Martin Kelly. Insanity defenses are used in a small fraction of U.S. criminal cases and are rarely successful. According to experts in psychiatry and law, jurors might be skeptical that mental illness absolves someone from a crime or fear that a not guilty verdict could ultimately release a dangerous individual back into society. Esteban was charged with assaulting Madeline, the 84-year-old woman, with a knife, as well as the murder of James. The trial began in June 2006. In his opening statement to the jury, the defense attorney acknowledged that the evidence of his client committing the actions was overwhelming. However, the key question for him was whether Esteban was too disturbed to be held fully accountable. One of the first witnesses was a police officer who admitted during his testimony that Esteban had been beaten during the arrest. On June 19th, the accused's mother and his 24-year-old girlfriend testified about Esteban's alarming behavior prior to the incidents. Following their testimonies, 2 doctors took the stand. Both specialists argued that the accused lacked the capacity to commit the crime due to the severe effects of schizophrenia, and thus should not be held fully responsible. The next day, the state countered by presenting Professor David and forensic psychiatrist Martin. Professor David testified that he had examined the results of psychological tests administered to the accused while he awaited trial at the Adult Correctional Institute and concluded that the administration of the test and subsequent results were questionable and that Esteban's responses indicated feigning and malingering. Forensic psychiatrist Martin then testified that at the time of the crimes, Esteban did not suffer from any mental disease or defect that would have prevented him from understanding the wrongfulness of his actions or conforming his conduct to the requirements of the law. In summary, they described him as manipulative, with a pronounced criminal and antisocial profile. After about 9 hours of deliberation, the jury rejected the insanity defense and delivered their verdict, finding Esteban guilty of first-degree murder of Detective James. He was also found guilty of firing a weapon during a violent crime that resulted in death, and of assaulting Madeline with a dangerous weapon. Meanwhile, the cries of Esteban's family members filled the gallery. The court offered to consider a new trial motion after the July 4th holiday, but Esteban's defense attorney emailed the court on July 5, 2006, indicating that no such motion would be filed. The sentencing hearing took place on October 6, 2006. In his first public statement since the trial began, Esteban told the court that his life and health were fine until something happened one day that he could not control. Then, in tears, he apologized to the Allen family for what had occurred.
Every day, I face the facts of what I did and what happened.
The judge then sentenced him to 2 consecutive life sentences, one without the possibility of parole for the crime against James, and an additional consecutive 20-year sentence for the aggravated assault on Madeline. The judge harshly addressed the defendant, stating that the court had no doubt he was incorrigible. Thus, allowing even the possibility of parole was antithetical in a civilized society. The Attorney General released a statement hours later, praising the judgment as a gesture to honor the memory of one of the best officers of the Providence Police Department. Subsequently, the Rhode Island Supreme Court upheld the convictions and denied the defense's request to reduce the life sentence without parole. As for Madeline, she recovered without complications. Since James's burial, Marge made it a habit to visit her husband's grave about 4 times a year. She always smiled, remembering that James rested near a cemetery path. After all, watching who passed by was part of his job. She consistently left floral arrangements that included a white rose, with no particular reason for choosing that color, but it became a tradition for the detective's widow. In 2015, on the 10th anniversary of her husband's death, Marge found the courage to consider her first interview. She acknowledged that, for the first 9 years, a physical pain in her chest prevented her from speaking. However, she eventually overcame the pain. During that interview with a reporter, she felt free to criticize the negative press often directed at law enforcement officers. Marge knew firsthand that police work is challenging and involves making difficult decisions. Once she broke her silence, she also addressed the numerous accusations of racism associated with her husband's case. When asked if speaking out would help her find closure, she disagreed with the term, stating there is no closure, just time that always flies by, gradually healing the wounds. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
She sit straight up and got out of bed when she seen me and started screaming, and I tried to get her to be quiet. I had the knife, it was on the bed. It's about that long, and she rolled against it and cut right here, best I could tell. And I'm no medic. It cut this jugular vein right here.
How far across?
Well, right here.
He described where he stabbed.
These were just some of the chilling confessions made by the truck driver who had been targeting women while crisscrossing America. Adam was born on August 6, 1964, in Jonesville, a small town in North Carolina, USA. He dropped out of high school early. Adam was a tall, burly man with a thick, rough beard. He was married to Miriam Benj for 5 years. Their relationship was rocky because, according to Miriam, Adam thought women were beneath him and that he could do whatever he wanted with them. He was abusive to Miriam and even to his own mother, whom he insulted and hit. In 1993, the couple divorced. That year, Adam became a truck driver and began traveling along the East Coast. He drove trucks and worked part-time at a chicken processing plant near his home in Jonesville. Years later, he settled down with another woman. They lived in a trailer home with 3 daughters. Adam had never been in serious trouble, but those who knew him described him as dismissive of women and often antisocial, controlling, and always ready to pick a fight. A former co-worker traveled with Adam in his truck for about a month in the late 90s, covering much of the country. His co-worker eventually refused to work with him any longer because of Adam's constant negativity, argumentative nature, and disrespectful attitude towards women. In his truck, Adam carried a DVD of a horror movie called Hunting Humans. The film, about a serial killer who stalked and then knifed his victims, had a huge impact on him. So much so that when he set out on his trucking trips to the northeastern United States in the summer of 2007, the first things he packed were the DVD, 2 large hunting knives, a torch, and a leather mask with holes for the eyes and mouth. In July 2007, Adam left North Carolina and headed east on Interstate 78, with stops planned in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Early on July 13, 2007, Darlene Ewald, a 42-year-old mother of 2, was on the phone in the backyard of her home in the middle-class suburb of West Hanover Township, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. While she spoke, her husband Todd, a carpenter and youth soccer coach, and their children, Nick and Nicole, ages 24 and 21, were asleep inside. It was around 2 a.m., and Darlene was chatting with a family friend about a surprise trip they were planning. That friend had planned a Caribbean cruise but ended up offering their tickets to Todd and Darlene after having to discipline their sons. Darlene was thrilled about the upcoming October adventure. Unbeknownst to her, someone was watching her on the warm night. Suddenly, from the darkness, a figure emerged wielding a long knife. It was Adam. The killer slit the woman's throat and violently stabbed her in the left side of her chest until she died within minutes. All she could scream was, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" On the other end of the phone, her friend heard the sudden change in her voice. Although Darlene no longer responded, the call was still active. He shouted her name, hoping she would answer. Panicked, he rushed upstairs to wake his wife and told her something terrible had happened to Darlene and that he needed to go to her house immediately. Meanwhile, after the murder, Adam calmly returned to his truck, parked at a nearby stop, and drove away, leaving behind the crime scene. Chad and Patty, Darlene's friends, sped to her house. Arriving there, the place was eerily quiet and they headed to the backyard. The kitchen lights shone through the sliding glass doors, and they could see Darlene's lifeless body slumped in a chair, her eyes still open and a gaping wound in her throat. Shocked, they immediately called the police. When the officers arrived, Todd was still asleep in his room. An officer yelled at him to show his hands. Todd, groggy and barely understanding what was happening, was blinded by flashlights and confronted with guns pointed at him. Nick experienced a similar rude awakening. Both men were handcuffed and taken to the kitchen. Todd kept asking what was happening and where his wife was, but the police did not answer. Then he noticed Darlene's purse on the table next to her car keys and cell phone, which made him worry. The detective eventually removed Todd's handcuffs and took him to another room, while another officer spoke with Nick in the kitchen. Todd then received the devastating news. Darlene was dead. He was heartbroken, feeling a pain like never before, as if someone had ripped his heart out. The whole Ewald family was in shock. Meanwhile, Adam continued with his life as if nothing had happened. Later that morning, he picked up a load from a company as scheduled to continue with his work. Hours later, the detectives interrogated Todd at the station. He struggled to explain how he hadn't heard anything. However, the detectives were not satisfied with his testimony and considered him the prime suspect in his wife's death. The next day, they brought him back to the station for further questioning. They asked about sensitive points in their marriage and accused him of killing her over financial troubles based on their reviewed finances. Todd insisted he had a good job and savings and had no reason to murder his wife. The police then suggested that she wanted to separate from him, which led to her death. Todd maintained his innocence and even took a lie detector test, which the police said he failed. Confused and desperate, he then sought a lawyer. The family was left completely devastated by the crime. Since the incident, Nicole, the 21-year-old daughter, refused to go out alone at night. Her brother Nick relived the tragic memory of their mother's death, often lying awake at night. Todd said the murder destroyed his life and wished he could have been there to save her. Darlene was the first, but sadly not the last victim of the so-called highway killer. On the night of July 17, 2007, in Conewago Township, rural York County, Pennsylvania, a woman named Patricia Brooks was sleeping on her couch when Adam burst into her home. The house was close to Interstate 76 and about 25 miles south of where he committed his first murder. Adam stabbed Patricia in the neck and shoulder with a huge knife. She woke up to indescribable pain, immediately covering the wound with her hands and screaming. Adam then fled through the back door he had entered minutes before, allowing Patricia to survive the attack, although she could not make out any features of the man dressed in black who had attacked her. Monica loved her new home, located in Bloomsbury, New Jersey. Everyone there was friendly, and she felt that nothing bad could happen. She felt so secure that she never locked her doors. Monica had great friends with whom she spent hours talking online. She also had other big passions: photography, motorcycles, and rock and roll. Without any ties, she lived life to the fullest, attending concerts and traveling, embracing each day as if it were her last. On the night of July 28, 2007, Monica was sleeping in her bed when, around midnight, Adam parked his truck at a nearby stop. Dressed in black and carrying a knife, he hid in the shadows, silently moving through the picturesque streets in the dead of night, searching for unlocked doors. Finding Monica's front door open, he quietly stepped inside. He moved through the house noiselessly until he reached the bedroom on the first floor. Startled awake, Monica turned on the light, and that's when he attacked her with the knife. He fatally stabbed her in the throat. She bled out and died quickly, but not before struggling against her assailant. Adam stabbed her multiple times in the neck and chest. Monica died alone at the hands of that monster, without time to call for help or escape. She was cornered with nowhere to go. The crime shocked the peaceful community. Initially, detectives focused on people Monica might have been romantically involved with, as it seemed like a crime of passion. However, they found no solid leads. The police had no suspects until they noticed something significant. Monica lived near the truck stop and the interstate. They decided to contact the FBI, which had begun to systematize investigations of similar crimes occurring along interstate highways across the country. The federal agency suspected there might be one or several serial killers, possibly a trucker who used the highways to randomly select his victims, stalk them, kill them, and then escape. Less than 24 hours after Monica's murder, a new chapter of horror unfolded in Chelmsford, a town in Massachusetts. Adam continued his route northward, parking his truck at a rest area. Around 11 p.m. on July 29, 2007, In an apartment complex, a woman spotted a man hiding in the bushes and called the police. By the time the officers arrived, the man had vanished, but a few hours later, security agents received a frantic call through the 911 emergency service. A man was trying to enter the home of a woman located in a mobile home park. She reported that her daughter thought she saw someone staring at their house, so she went outside to check. There, she encountered an individual dressed all in black, wearing a mask, looking like a ninja. The man turned around, followed her, and banged on the door. She was terrified. The police arrived within minutes, but once again, the suspect had vanished. 90 minutes later, around 4:30 a.m., Adam showed up at the home of Kevin and Jeannie McDonough, located about 2 miles from the trailer park and just off the highway. Kevin, a 49-year-old utility line contractor, and his wife, a 47-year-old administrative clerk, lived in a 4-bedroom house in Chelmsford, a town named one of the best places to live in the United States in 2007. Their 2 children, Shay, 15, and Ryan, 19, also lived in the house. Adam tried the back door and found it unlocked. Shay had left it unlocked around midnight because she thought her brother was still out, not knowing that Ryan had stayed at a friend's house that night. So, Adam entered the house without any trouble. The family's dog, a black Labrador mix named Bosco, was outside and never barked, later leading to suspicions that he might have been drugged by the intruder. That warm night, everyone in the town was asleep. Shay had moved to the guest room because it had air conditioning and was right next to her parents' room, making it cooler to sleep. Suddenly, she felt a huge hand covering her mouth and nose. It was Adam, wearing a mask with openings for the eyes and mouth. In his other hand, he held a huge hunting knife. She couldn't breathe and couldn't see well in the dark room. At first, she thought it was her brother who had come home late, but then she heard a stranger's voice threatening to kill her and making some noise. Adam pulled down the sheets that covered her, and that's when she panicked. She, a swimmer with strong legs, began kicking vigorously against the wall adjoining her parents' room. What happened next, in moments of desperation in the quiet Massachusetts neighborhood, was both a complete nightmare and an incredible story of heroism. She's frantic kicks and a muffled groan woke her parents, who thought she was having a nightmare. But when they entered the room, they saw the huge intruder, initially just a large black silhouette to them. Adam, who was 5.9 feet tall and weighed 245 pounds, was confronted by Kevin, who weighed 160 kilograms and was 5.6 feet tall. Kevin lunged at the intruder, grabbing his wrists, throwing him to the ground and pinning him down. He shouted, demanding to know who he was, while Jeannie tried to wrestle the knife away. Suddenly, Adam burst with adrenaline and stood up with Kevin on his back. Kevin held on and wrapped his arm around Adam's neck. Then, both men crashed against a wall. With his back against the wall, Kevin squeezed the criminal's trachea as hard as he could. Meanwhile, Jeannie managed to take the knife away but severely cut both her hands in the process. By then, Shay had run out and was calling 911 on her cell phone. She told the operator that a tall, burly man had entered her room and threatened her life, and that her parents had caught him. Jeannie and Kevin fought hard to defend themselves, struggling for their lives while waiting for the police. Sometimes, people freeze in situations like these, but the McDonoughs undoubtedly summoned incredible strength and managed to subdue Adam, who was much larger than them, even wresting the knife from him. The officers arrived at the house in 4 minutes and saw Adam subdued by the family. Kevin had applied a powerful headlock that immobilized him. One of the officers warned the intruder not to move or he'd shoot him in the head, while Kevin calmly brushed himself off and asked the police to remove that scum from his home. As the police patted him down, they found evidence that alarmed them. A couple of knives, larger military-style household knives, and a belt from which sheaths for the blades hung. They also discovered a flashlight used for strangling, a ninja star, a hood, and a terrifying leather mask with cut-out eyes and mouth. Meanwhile, in Adam's truck, they found what appeared to be trophies or souvenirs from previous victims and several DVDs, including one from the movie Hunting Humans. After the incident, life slowly returned to normal for the family. Shay started seeing a therapist to help manage the terror she sometimes felt, but she still had problems sleeping alone. In fact, their dog Bosco began to sleep by her side every night. Whenever she saw a shadow, Shay would still get up, but she was grateful to be alive and often remembered how her parents fought for her. They didn't consider themselves superheroes, just parents who acted instinctively to protect their daughter. The FBI was handling a database of about 80,000 unresolved violent crimes across the United States. They had started gathering information on serial killings and assaults near major highways. By 2007, they had recorded more than 500 murders with similar characteristics over the past 30 years, but they were concerned there might be more hidden cases. Approximately 200 suspects had been identified, most of them truckers. With their investigations, the FBI had helped state police with baffling crimes that remained unsolved, and also connected cases that were sometimes half a country apart. Often, suspects use distance as a smokescreen to cover their tracks. When they dispose of a body and move 2 or 3 states away, they know it will be difficult to be identified. The first thing the FBI does when it receives a case is to look for specific characteristics they can investigate. For example, if someone is strangled, the search focuses on all strangling cases. After receiving calls from the police in Massachusetts and New Jersey about unresolved stabbing cases, an FBI analyst determined they were very similar and not far from major highways. This prompted them to put officers from both states in contact. Soon they began linking Adam to his other crimes. Investigators learned that the criminal had been in Bloomsbury the night Monica Massaro died, at a truck stop less than a mile from her house. A receipt found in his truck led them to that lead. In August 2007, a New Jersey police investigator decided to go to Massachusetts to question Adam about Monica's murder. For over an hour, the detective conversed amiably with Adam, just trying to gain his trust. Then, he directly asked if Adam had attacked anyone in New Jersey. Adam then asked if there was the death penalty in that state. The detective replied that no one had been executed there for years. Adam smirked and said, "That's why I haven't done anything there. What I've done is what I've done, and I haven't done anything wrong." Then Adam confessed to killing Monica and described the crime in detail.
She sat straight up and got out of bed when she seen me and started screaming, and I tried to get her to be quiet. I had the knife, it was on the bed. It's about that long, and she rolled against it and cut right here, best I could tell. And I'm no medic. It cut this jugular vein right here.
How far across?
Showing no remorse and exhibiting great cruelty. Initially, Adam claimed he was just a struggling trucker trying to make ends meet for his family of 5. He said he had been sidelined by a back injury, which affected his finances and required him to take medication for various ailments, including hallucinations and diabetes. He claimed his original plan was only to steal some money. He tried to justify his actions by saying he had lost everything, including his family. At the same time, he insisted that he respected the law and treated people the way he liked to be treated. He claimed that when he entered Monica's house and found her asleep, he covered her mouth, but she resisted, and in the struggle, she accidentally rolled onto the knife and bled to death. He then claimed he tried to cover up the crime by stabbing her multiple times to make it look like a sexual crime. The detectives found his version of accidental death hard to believe. Adam insisted that he didn't intend to kill her and that he used his knives as intimidation tactics in case he was discovered. He also denied deriving any sexual pleasure from the murders. Almost a month after his arrest in Massachusetts, Adam was charged with Monica's murder. In most of the cases, DNA has become one of the most accurate tools for individual identification, used by thousands of labs. It's employed first for the identification of biological traces of interest in criminal investigations of various crimes, second in the identification of human remains and missing persons, and third for biological research on paternity and other kinship relations. In Adam's case, DNA was also essential in linking him to his crimes. Weeks after the interrogation where he confessed to killing Monica, investigators received the analysis of the knives recovered in Massachusetts. One of them had blood on it. DNA analysis proved it was Monica's, as well as a necklace found among Adam's possessions in his truck. The man had also discarded some gloves as he ran from Patricia's house. Further analysis revealed the gloves had DNA from both Adam and Monica. Forensic scientists found blood samples on it that turned out to be from Darlene and Patricia, the first two women he attacked. Legal proceedings against the highway killer then began. In December 2007, Adam was sentenced to 25 to 30 years after pleading guilty to the attempted murder of Shay. He pleaded guilty to 9 of the 10 charges he faced, which included breaking and entering, armed assault in a dwelling, assault with intent to murder, and assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. He only denied the charge of attempting to rape a minor. When the judge asked him if he had done all that the McDonough family accused him of, the burly, bearded man, his arms chained to his waist, simply said, "Almost everything." Shay, who was 16 at the time, did not appear in court on the day of the sentencing, but her parents did. Jeannie, her mother, told Adam that one day he would have to answer for his actions, not just in a court of law. Adam's next trial was in October 2008 in New Jersey, where he pleaded guilty to Monica's murder and was sentenced to 50 years. Finally, in June 2010 in Pennsylvania, Adam pleaded guilty to 2 other crimes to avoid the death penalty. He was then sentenced to between 10 and 20 years for the attempted murder of Patricia and received a life sentence for the murder of Darlene. Members of Darlene's family addressed the judge before the sentencing, expressing a mix of sadness and anger. Todd, Darlene's husband, said what happened was the result of a senseless and unnecessary act by a coward. Adam, wearing the orange and white prison uniform, had his hands shackled. He looked different from the man who had been arrested. He had lost a considerable amount of weight and had his hair and beard cut short. He showed no emotion when he received his sentence and declined his right to speak because he had nothing to say, as he pointed out during the trial. Meanwhile, Nick, Darlene's 25-year-old son at the time of the trial, asked the judge to review the investigation and sentence his mother's killer to death. He told reporters outside the courthouse that he wished to see him dead, but the prosecution had decided not to seek the death penalty as such executions are rare in Pennsylvania. Adam Leroy is serving his sentences at a maximum security prison with 2,000 beds. Authorities have speculated whether Adam was involved in other murders, given the extensive routes truckers take, but this has not been proven. Even the criminal himself has refused to comment to the police on this speculation. One such case occurred in the town where Adam lived, and relates to the murder of a police officer who was shot 7 times in October 1996, and his body was found in his patrol car after he had pulled over a truck reported as stolen. Although the modus operandi in this case is substantially different from Adam's, a composite sketch of the suspect created with the help of witnesses resembles the highway killer. In 2011, Jeannie McDonough published a book recounting how a normal family ended the criminal crusade of a serial killer. It started as a personal diary with which the woman tried to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions she felt after saving her daughter from the monster Adam, and the guilt and sadness she experienced for the other victims of the man. She then began to learn more about the women who fell victim to the criminal. She attended several trials in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and started exchanging letters with relatives and friends of the victims. All of this is detailed in the book. Over time, Shay moved in with some friends and began working as a nanny, and her parents had to fight against the sense of overprotection towards their daughter. They also installed a powerful home security system. The case of Adam brings us back to motiveless killers. He was perhaps an aggressive man, but with no criminal record, who suddenly at the age of 43 embarked on a 17-day murder spree, committing crimes against 4 women who had no connection to each other or to him. They simply lived in houses near a major road and had the misfortune of leaving their doors unlocked. The highways became the hunting ground for this man, who chose his victims randomly, only focusing on those who could not defend themselves or pose a threat to him. This concludes today's Unreal True Crime episode. Again, I remind you to subscribe and leave a like to let me know you appreciate my work. Good night, until next time. As you know, here at Unreal True Crime, we release videos every other day. Many of you have reached out, expressing a desire for daily content, so we've launched a new channel also focused on real-life crime stories called The Crime Storyteller. On the days we don't post videos on Unreal True Crime, we'll upload them there. This means if you're looking for daily doses of the most astonishing real-life crime cases, don't hesitate to subscribe. Without further ado, let's dive into today's case. Ayla Reynolds was born on April 4, 2010 in Waterville, a city in the state of Maine, United States. She was a beautiful girl with blonde hair, blue eyes, and an irresistible smile. She loved music and dancing to the rhythm of her favorite songs. Her parents, Trista Reynolds and Justin DiPietro, were not a couple but had known each other for a long time. They had a brief romance in the summer of 2009, resulting in Trista getting pregnant. The news was particularly surprising for Justin, who had no intention of having a child with Trista and even doubted he was the father. When Trista gave birth to Ayla, the resemblance to Justin was undeniable, but he still refused to acknowledge her as his daughter. A paternity test in July 2010 finally made him accept his parenthood. Consequently, in December of the same year, he was ordered by Child Protective Services to provide child support. Trista and Justin didn't have a court-approved custody agreement. However, Trista, who lived in Portland, had the primary physical custody of Ayla thanks to an arrangement between them. It was only in mid-2011, after Ayla's first birthday, that Justin started having visits with her. He lived an hour and a half away, and the encounters were meant to be during the day and very brief. They agreed that he could occasionally take Ayla with him, but never overnight. In the months following Ayla's birth, Trista became pregnant again, this time by her fiancé Raymond. Thus, in 2011, Ayla became the elder sister to Raymond Jr., and Trista managed the care of both children. Everything changed on October 13, 2011, when Trista had an encounter with Child Protective Services. The details of the complaint that led to this meeting are not clear, but it was known that Trista had a substance abuse problem. That day, officials gave her an ultimatum: overcome her addiction or lose her children. Immediately, Trista entered a 10-day rehabilitation program and left her children in the care of her mother and sister. Ayla and Raymond were her world, and she was determined not to lose them. By October 2011, Justin had seen Ayla approximately 5 to 10 times. However, just 4 days after Trista's internment on October 17th, Justin and his family decided they wanted custody of Ayla. Justin's mother, Phoebe DiPietro, contacted Child Protective Services and received approval to take Ayla. The official call to inform Trista's relatives about the agency's decision came swiftly. When Ayla's aunt heard that they had to hand over Ayla, she criticized the decision, claiming that Justin was abusive and had harmed the child in the past. The officials argued that a father has more rights to custody than an aunt. Once permission was granted, Justin and his family went to pick up Ayla, but they did not know the address. The child protection officials provided the location through the police. Officer Charles Weaver accompanied Justin and his mother to Jessica's house, Ayla's aunt. The paternal grandmother waited in the car while Justin and the police officer went to the door, leading to a dramatic scene. Jessica implored the officer not to take the child away and warned that she wouldn't give up Ayla willingly. The officer noted that Ayla was in good spirits. She was incessantly laughing, playing, and even trying to initiate conversation. To demonstrate her point, Jessica, Trista's sister, told the officer to observe how Ayla's behavior changed when Justin appeared. At that moment, he had just approached, and seeing him, Ayla immediately started to cry and tried to distance herself. Despite this, the officer took the child and handed her to her father. Ayla was struggling and screaming and even attempted to bite the officer when she was placed in Justin's arms. Ayla's aunt told Officer Charles that Ayla was terrified of her father and that they couldn't take the child away. Charles explained that if it were his decision, he wouldn't let Ayla go with Justin, but it wasn't up to him. He was there to enforce the directive from Child Services. It's crucial to clarify that if Justin had wanted primary physical custody of Ayla, he would have had to reach an agreement with the child's mother or otherwise undergo a judicial process to obtain a judge's approval. As we saw in the custody exchange we just recounted, there was neither an agreement nor a court involved. What was applied was the judgment of a Child Protective Services supervisor. What the official did not consider were the arrangements made by the mother herself, who had full custody for the child to remain in the care of her relatives during her temporary absence. On the other hand, before a court grants a parent exclusive physical custody of a child, usually the conditions are thoroughly evaluated, including a background check and a home visit, which did not occur in Ayla's case. In essence, in custody procedures, the child's best interest must prevail, but reportedly, no report was found to support the adopted decision. In analyses published about Ayla's case, it was believed that only the presence of imminent danger threatening the child's safety could outweigh the stability and continuity provided by staying with her maternal relatives. In this sense, it could be thought that Child Protective Services officials believed the child was at risk. If that had been the case, it is not justified that the measure was applied only to Ayla and not to her little brother Raymond. The father took the girl to his childhood home in Waterville, where he lived with his 47-year-old mother, Phoebe, his 24-year-old sister, Elisha, and her daughter, Gabriella, who, like Ayla, was a baby. At that time, Justin, 25, occupied the partially finished basement, a single large room, while the rest of the family lived upstairs. During the time spent in rehabilitation, Trista called Justin every day to speak with Ayla and ensure everything was all right. In these contexts, she perceived no warning signs. On October 20th, 2011, coinciding with the 8th day of Trista's treatment, there was a meeting to discuss Ayla's case attended by Child Protective Services members, 2 doctors, Trista and her sister Jessica, who were accompanied by a lawyer, and Justin, who participated by phone. This encounter resulted in an agreement. Ayla would be returned to her mother on October 22, 2011, as soon as Trista completed the addiction recovering program. It was also agreed that Justin would bring Ayla to the treatment center on the 21st for a visit. Everything was going well for Trista, but the situation would soon change. None of the established agreements were fulfilled. Desperate to regain her daughter, Trista repeatedly called Child Protective Services for help to enforce the agreement made in their presence. Since she could not get anywhere with Child Protective Services, she sought a temporary agreement with Justin. He would continue to keep the child, and she would have regular visits. On November 12, 2011, Justin took the girl to an emergency room. After conducting the pertinent studies, the doctors determined that the little girl had a broken bone in one of her joints. Specifically, the broken bone was in the joint that connects the elbow to the upper arm. Justin told the doctor that the accident had occurred the previous night on November 11th. According to his account, it was raining, and he slipped and fell on her while on the porch with Ayla in his arms. He added that, although she had cried, she didn't seem to be injured, and it wasn't evident until the next morning that she required urgent medical attention. By the following Monday, the orthopedist considered that surgery wouldn't be necessary and that the injury would likely heal on its own. A week later, on November 26th, during her 3rd medical appointment to assess the child's progress, the specialist said things were going as planned. Trista was present at that medical consultation to closely follow her daughter's recovery, never thinking that this would be the last time she would hold her in her arms. From that moment, things spiraled. Tired of arguing over the custody of her daughter, over visitations, and even over her right to talk to the child on the phone, the mother decided to take a step forward. On December 15, 2011, she filed papers in court to initiate legal proceedings to obtain full physical custody of Ayla. Just 2 days later, on Saturday, December 17th, Justin called the police in the morning to report Ayla's disappearance from his mother's house, where he was staying with his girlfriend, Courtney Roberts, and his sister, Elisha. He assured them that they had put the 20-month-old girl to bed the night before, and when they woke up, she was gone. Early that morning, Trista had started a car trip to a coastal city in Maine, just 50 miles from the Canadian border, to visit her boyfriend Raymond, who had just entered a correctional facility after being convicted of arson. She was dozing in the passenger seat while her father-in-law, Robert Fortier, drove. Robert answered a call from Trista's father, informing him that Ayla was missing. The news left him frozen, and he looked for a suitable place to stop the vehicle and wake Trista. Still drowsy, she heard her father's voice and managed to understand that her baby's whereabouts were unknown. Desperate, Trista changed her course to meet the police who were searching for her little daughter. The journey lasted an hour and a half, but for Trista, it seemed like an eternity. Throughout the trip, she frantically called Justin to find out what had happened, terrified at the lack of response. Even upon arriving at the police station, both Trista and her fiancé's father gave statements. About 30 minutes later, Trista's father joined them at the police headquarters, angry and very distressed. As it transpired, Justin had called 911 that morning at 8:49 to report the disappearance. He said the last time someone saw Ayla was the previous night around 10 p.m., when his sister Elisha checked on her before going to bed. On Saturday morning, they discovered she had disappeared from her crib, but he didn't specify the time in the call. Justin's theory was that the minor had been kidnapped by an unknown intruder. The news of the minor's disappearance spread like wildfire, and the authorities wasted no time initiating an operation. Police chief spoke to the media, stating that the case was being aggressively investigated and that their goal was to find Ayla at all costs. The police proceeded to search the house for any clues that could lead them to the minor. To facilitate operations, the family stayed with friends. At the same time, a command center was established to coordinate the search operation. On the second day, Sunday, December 18th, search dogs were deployed, and the area around the house where Ayla was last seen was searched. Trista's home also underwent a meticulous search, during which the distressed woman had to stay with her mother and younger son in a motel. Trista's father found it exceedingly difficult to sit idle, as Ayla was the apple of his eye. On the third day, Monday, December 19th, the FBI was requested to assist in the search. By this time, 75 individuals from various agencies were involved in the operation. The Maine State Police seized 2 vehicles from the Di Pietro residence. One, a 1996 Ford Explorer, belonged to Justin. The other, a 4-door silver sedan, was owned by Justin's girlfriend, Courtney, who was also present on the night of the disappearance. From day one, local newspapers echoed the news the following morning. Headlines in print media were already covering the story, and 72 hours later, Trista could be seen in interviews with different local news outlets. She did not hesitate to point towards Justin. By the end of the first week, the Today Show, one of the most successful morning news programs in the United States, highlighted the news. There, Trista insisted that her daughter's father was the only one who could answer her questions, as he was the last to see her alive. On the evening of the 4th day, Justin made his first statement to the media. He appeared calm, as if the disappearance hadn't occurred while the child was under his care. He claimed to have no idea what happened to Ayla and stated he wouldn't make accusations or insinuations until the police determined who was responsible for the disappearance. He also announced that he and his family would do everything possible to aid the investigation and secure his daughter's return. During his statement, Justin acknowledged that Ayla was under his exclusive custody at the time of her disappearance, but he lied, stating that this was achieved through an agreement with the mother. Moreover, he added that Trista was incapable of taking care of the child. As days passed, the search efforts widened. The FBI's child abduction rapid deployment team canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on every door. They repeatedly interviewed neighbors, hoping to uncover some revealing details. The police emphasized the significant effort underway, seeing only commitment and energy from the 75 officers dedicated to resolving the case. Until the 10th day after Justin's complaint, it was estimated that 5,000 hours of work had been invested in the search, and 330 leads were being followed. The operation also involved around 50 civilian volunteers from the Search and Rescue Association. A reward of $30,000 was offered to anyone who could provide a lead that would help in recovering Ayla. Trista remained steadfast in her efforts to find her beloved daughter. The grieving mother was determined in her fight to keep everyone focused on the case. She worked with allies and support groups to organize vigils, marches, and events in memory of Ayla. News cameras were always present, and she, along with other spokespeople, offered new topics to journalists to keep the story on the front page and in the nation's mind. Gradually, the initially optimistic and hopeful message from the authorities started changing. The chief of police continued to insist that the investigation was being considered a missing person case and not a homicide. However, the mood definitively shifted when Justin's house and the surrounding area were cordoned off. The cars were confiscated, and the head of the Maine criminal prosecution made a public appearance. The police publicly ruled out the possibility of Ayla having walked away on her own, and on the 13th day, the police chief handed over the reins of the case to the State Police Serious Crime Unit. At that moment, an announcement nobody wanted to hear was made. The case ceased being the search for a missing girl and started being considered a criminal investigation. During the initial days, Justin tried to stay as far away from the media as possible, but gradually his presence began to become more frequent. In one of his appearances on the Today Show, he spoke about the change in the message from the law enforcement agencies, insisted that someone had kidnapped Ayla, and expressed his wish for whoever took her to return her home. He also asserted that he had come on the program hoping to reach whoever had his daughter to let them know that what they were doing was wrong. As if he knew the person in question, he spoke directly to them, saying they might think what they were doing was right for Ayla, but it wasn't. He clarified that this person had no right because they weren't her father, and that the child needed to be at home with her family. When questioned about the silence he had maintained until that point, Justin acknowledged that his efforts to cooperate had been delayed. He justified himself by stating that he had been a bit naive during the first weeks, thinking that Ayla would return. He also claimed that the law enforcement agencies had advised him to stay away from the press. This was partially confirmed by the spokesperson for the Maine Department of Public Safety, who explained that this was only said to him at the beginning. Later, the police themselves encouraged Ayla's parents to remain in the public eye. Justin took the opportunity to respond directly to the insinuations that had been made about him. He asked the television host to come see him and spend a day with him to witness what he was going through. Finally, he said that he praised the police's efforts, although some of the techniques and tactics they had to use had not been enjoyable. He pointed out that the truth is the truth. No matter how many times you are asked the same question and shouted at that you are a liar, anticipating that the truth is patient and would come to light. By the end of January, the police revealed that Ayla's blood had been found in various places in the DiPietro house. It also emerged that, while there was not enough evidence to make any arrests, Justin, Courtney, and Elisha, the three adults living in the residence where the girl was last seen, were considered suspects. Stephen McCausland, the spokesperson for the Maine Department of Public Safety, said that the family's version of events was not supported by any forensic evidence, thereby ruling out the possibility that someone could have entered the bedroom where Ayla slept alone and taken her without any of the three adults in the house noticing. 6 months after Ayla's disappearance was reported, on May 30th, 2012, the police said that it was unlikely that the little girl was alive. Trista's family allowed journalists into their home as they watched the press conference where this news was announced. Trista immediately broke into tears. Then her sorrow turned to rage, and she asserted that Justin had killed her baby. For Trista's family, learning in detail the results of some forensic tests conducted at Justin's family's house was very hard. They knew Ayla's blood was found and had even been told that the amount found was equivalent to 25% of the blood volume of her body. However, they had never been in front of the evidence until January 2013, when everything discovered was revealed to them. To begin with, Justin's 1996 Ford Explorer had a baby seat in the back, and Ayla's blood was found on the left shoulder strap. There was also dried gastric fluid on the back seats. In the girl's bedroom, blood was found on some of her princess, pink sneakers on the floor next to her crib, as well as on the face and arms of her doll. The investigators thought that she might have tried to clean the blood from her mouth with her toy. Additionally, a blood stain was located on the living room sofa. However, most of the blood traces were in the basement. A pool of Ayla's blood stained the center of the mattress on which Justin slept with Courtney. Moreover, vomit and an unidentified pink fiber resembling hair that could be from a toy were found on the bed. Next to the same piece of furniture were Justin's sneakers stained with Ayla's blood on the tongue and inside. Additionally, there were splashes on the cement floor around the bed and on the walls. The latter matched Ayla's height. An expert determined that some drops were the size of a dime, indicative of trauma from a blunt object. Additionally, the experts determined that some blood spatter patterns in the house might have been expelled by Ayla through coughing, indicating that her injuries were both internal and external. The police stated that bed linens had been used to clean the girl's blood. It was horrific for Trista and her family to learn these details, and they hadn't seen everything yet. The same officers exposing the gruesome evidence warned them that they were about to witness something even more horrifying. Luminol tests were conducted in the house, revealing blood traces invisible to the naked eye. The slides taken at the house devastated Trista. After seeing them, she left the police station in a panic. She was more convinced than ever that her daughter, Ayla, had been murdered. The police said there were more images to show her, but she refused to see them. She'd had enough. Reportedly, when the police showed Justin and the DiPietro family the same photographic evidence months before, he showed no reaction. The police also tried to show the photos to the family with whom the DiPietro stayed during their exile from their house while it was being processed by crime scene investigators. They refused. They were not interested. Justin's girlfriend, Courtney, who was with Justin on the night of the disappearance, had the same reaction. After confronting the compelling police findings, Trista told the press amid her unbearable pain and helplessness that Justin, Elisha, and Courtney were still walking the streets as if nothing had happened. 8 months after receiving the dramatic report in September 2013, Trista wrote an explosive letter to the press about the evidence and the photos she had been shown. She was tired of waiting and, with or without law enforcement's blessing, she wanted to rekindle public interest in the case. In spring 2016, a team of journalists went to Justin's mother's house. Elisha, Ayla's aunt, answered the door, and the journalist asked about the blood evidence. She explained that Ayla was lactose intolerant and had been vomiting. However, a quick internet search showed that common symptoms of lactose intolerance are gas, bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. While nausea and vomiting are listed, they are not the most common symptoms, let alone vomiting blood. In 2017, at Trista's request, a judge finally declared Ayla legally dead. The magistrate ruled that the death occurred around December 17, 2011, when she was reported missing by her father, Justin. With that resolution in hand, Trista and her lawyers filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin, alleging he caused Ayla's death through intentional unlawful acts and subjected the girl to pain prior to death, fear, terror, and physical injuries. At the time the lawsuit was filed, the subject was missing, and it was later learned that he and his lawyers denied any wrongdoing and labeled the lawsuit baseless. Faced with this, Trista decided to hold a press conference in which she addressed her dead daughter's father directly, asking him if he had any conscience.
I can see it in your eyes. And you know that's the problem. You look at me and I know you care.
Just say something, man.
Please, Justin.
Earlier this year, 2023, a judge approved Trista's petition to include Phoebe and Elisha in the wrongful death lawsuit. The 3 defendants are facing civil charges for wrongful death, conscious pain and suffering, and unlawful interference with the body of a deceased person. Additionally, Justin faces a charge for breaching a parent's duty to care for a minor child. Both Trista and her lawyer knew that they would not receive any financial compensation from Justin. That wasn't the goal of the lawsuit. Their objective was to reveal information and uncover the truth. There were so many strange things about Ayla's disappearance. For example, investigators told Trista something astonishing about the morning Ayla disappeared. Before calling 911, Justin drove to Portland and back. He claimed he thought Trista had taken Ayla and was looking for her, but he never called her or any of her family members. However, during that long trip, he did call his friend, who had sold him a $25,000 life insurance policy for Ayla a few weeks before. The weird thing is that Justin stayed at this friend's house while detectives advanced the investigations after the disappearance. This action was astonishing, considering that Justin stayed out of his baby's life during the 9 months of pregnancy and most of the child's existence. Trista also revealed having received strange messages from Justin in the week following the day he took Ayla. He mentioned being afraid that someone would try to kidnap her or snatch her away. The last time he said something similar was around December 11th, 6 days before the disappearance was reported. But when the child disappeared, those same messages became threatening and confusing. Trista said she had always wondered what those words meant. And well, that concludes today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, give a like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. See you soon. This is Unreal True Crime.